In a show of support for Israel, the Republican-led House approved a bill to punish the ICC for its decision to issue arrest warrants for top Israeli leaders over the war in Gaza.
House lawmakers, whose only real accomplishment is taking part in the least productive Congress in American history, have demonstrated that there is one issue that they care about deeply enough to roll up their sleeves and get to work on. Now, it has nothing to do with the American people or the constituents who place them in their position of power that they enjoy today. The drinking water in their districts might be contaminated with lead, or the homeless population could be exploding due to the lack of affordable housing in their districts. I'm looking at you, Congressman Brad Sherman. We hear that there's just too much gridlock to do a damn thing about the horrific conditions an increasing percentage of Americans are living in. But when it comes to providing cover for the crimes committed by the Israeli government against the Palestinian people, well, suddenly gridlock isn't much of an issue, which is why the House of Representatives has passed a bill imposing sanctions against the International Criminal Court, or ICC. The House passed the bill in a 247 to 155 vote, with 42 Democrats joining Republicans in support. 2 GOP members voted present. Wow, look at that beautiful bipartisanship, wow. In reality, this decision marks a dark new development in the ongoing tensions between the United States and the ICC over its investigations into Israel's war crimes. Now let's back up a little and figure out how we got here in the first place. Last month, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan announced on CNN that the ICC was seeking arrest warrants for Hamas leadership.
Christian, we've applied for warrants to the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court in relation to 3 individuals that are Hamas members. Sinwar, who's in charge on the ground.
That's Yahya Sinwar?
Absolutely. Dave, who's in charge of the Al-Qassam Brigade. And Hania, who's one of their political bureau based in Doha.
The chief prosecutor's decision absolutely makes sense, considering the disgusting atrocities that were committed by Hamas against Israeli civilians on October 7th. Around 1,200 people were killed, hostages were taken, and even children were slaughtered. No one has a problem with the ICC targeting Hamas. Well, I mean, other than Hamas, of course. But Karim Khan announced something else that enraged US lawmakers and the Israel lobby, which of course sustains the political careers of said politicians.
You have also issued warrants against the top political and military leadership of the government of the State of Israel.
We've applied for warrants. Of course, the judges must determine whether or not to issue them, but we've applied today. We'll apply for warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and also Minister of Defense Gallant for the crimes of causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, deliberately targeting civilians in conflict. And the sad thing really is in relation to both categories.
Many believe that genocide is being committed, but you do not. You're not using that word.
Well, this is an active investigation, and we have criminal charges that we can use: genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. In relation to this current stage of investigations, the charges that we've put forward to the judges do not include genocide.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth, as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
The fact that the ICC would even consider arrest warrants for Israeli leadership not only enraged Israel, but it also infuriated American lawmakers, even though the ICC does not have its own enforcement mechanism and has relied on country support for arrests. A decision to seek arrest warrants doesn't immediately mean an individual is guilty, but is the first stage in a process that could lead to a lengthy trial. But even though Israel and the United States have not ratified the ICC treaty, all of Europe has joined the International Court. So if someone accused of war crimes visits any of the ICC countries, they could be arrested and tried at The Hague. If convicted, they could be sent to prison. And while ICC Chief Prosecutor Khan doesn't want to accuse Israel of committing genocide yet, some Holocaust survivors certainly do.
Aryeh Nair, he's a giant in the world of human rights and a survivor of genocide himself. He was born a Jew in Nazi Germany. You, I think, only one time accused a country of genocide.
Yes.
Saddam Hussein's attempt to eliminate the Kurds.
The Kurds.
You have concluded that Israel is guilty of attempting genocide.
Yes.
That's a very heavy charge.
Yes. 2,000-pound bombs, which are utterly inappropriate in a crowded urban area. A bomb like that can kill somebody 2 football fields away.
But our lawmakers have dismissed arguments like the one you just heard and have opted to punish the International Criminal Court instead. Here's Republican Congressman Chip Roy filleting Israel on the House floor just yesterday while promoting the sanctions legislation he himself introduced.
We're here because the International Criminal Court is seeking to issue warrants on the Prime Minister of Israel. It merits letting that just sit out here and marinate for a second, that's what we're dealing with.
Cool, I'm sitting, it's marinating, and yep, I think it's a good idea. Continue.
This is Israel. This is not some random entity. This is Israel, our close ally.
Is it? How? Was Israel our ally when Netanyahu fought real hard to persuade the United States to carry out a preemptive war in Iraq in 2003? I know I'm not supposed to be talking about this. A country, by the way, that had nothing to do with 9/11.
Take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people, and many others will say, the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone. The application of power is the most important thing in winning the war on terrorism. If I had to say, what are the 3 principles of winning the war on terror? It's like, what are the 3 principles of real estate, the 3 L's, location, location, location? The 3 principles of winning the war on terror are the 3 W's, winning, winning, and winning.
Yeah, there was no winning. Remember when our government exploited the tragic terror attack on 9/11 to lie to the American people about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction so we'd all be okay with invading them? Turns out that part of the reason why we invaded Iraq was because Israel was perceiving Iraq as a security threat. So the Bush administration sacrificed the men and women in our military to fight Israel's war. It all makes sense now, doesn't it? And it came at a tremendous cost to the American people. The Defense Department estimates the United States spent $728 billion directly on the war in Iraq from the 2003 through 2012 fiscal years. The official withdrawal happened a few months into the 2012 fiscal year. 4,492 US service members were killed in Iraq. 32,292 service members were wounded. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians were also killed. And if you think what I'm saying is outrageous, that's totally fine. This is forbidden information among the American media, I get it. But I'm not afraid, and there's a super thick book about it with lots of receipts called The Israel Lobby, which was written by political scientists John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt. I highly, highly recommend the read. So what do sanctions against the ICC mean? Well, right now it's unclear whether the Senate will take this legislation on, meaning that the House bill might just go nowhere. Biden shockingly says he's against ICC sanctions, to his credit. So even if the Senate does pass the bill, there's a chance that Biden won't sign it. But look, I wouldn't gamble on that since Biden tends to reverse course anytime he lightly jabs Israel. But if the sanctions become law, it is important to know what the bill includes. According to the legislative text, the bill would impose sanctions on individuals engaged in any effort to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any protected person of the United States and its allies. The sanctions include prohibiting US property transactions and blocking and revoking visas. It's pathetic. And it's not the first time the United States has sanctioned the ICC. In fact, I remember when Democrats made a huge deal over this.
The US has brought sanctions against the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor and one of her top aides over investigations into war crimes allegations against US forces in Afghanistan and elsewhere. The penalties, which include a freeze on assets subject to US law, target prosecutor Fatou Bensouda and the ICC's head of jurisdiction Fekisu Mochuchoko. The US has never been a member of the ICC, which was created to pursue crimes against humanity cases where other judicial recourse isn't available. Trump's administration's called the court corrupt. Rights groups have condemned the move against the ICC, accusing the US of bullying.
Well, speaking of bullying, an explosive report by The Guardian and Israeli magazines 972 and Local Call highlights the insane threats and intimidation tactics Israel has been deploying against the ICC for nearly a decade. Obviously, this occurred even before this ongoing war in Gaza. The piece is titled "Spying, Hacking, and Intimidation: Israel's 9-year war on the ICC Exposed." Here's what the investigation found. Israel deployed its intelligence agencies to surveil, hack, pressure, smear, and allegedly threaten senior ICC staff in an effort to derail the court's inquiries. This was overseen by Netanyahu's national security advisors and involved Israel's spy agency, the Shin Bet, as well as the military's intelligence directorate, Amman, and cyber intelligence division, Unit 8200. Then the intelligence gleaned from the spying and hacking was disseminated to government ministries of justice, foreign affairs, and strategic affairs. Israeli intelligence captured the communications of numerous ICC officials, including Karim Khan and his predecessor as prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, intercepting phone calls, messages, emails, and documents. Bensouda was the chief prosecutor who opened the ICC's investigation on Israel, and in 2019 announced that she intended to investigate Israel's alleged atrocities during its 2014 war in Gaza.
I am satisfied, one, that war crimes have been or are being committed in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. Two, that potential cases arising from the situation would be admissible. And three, that there are no substantial reasons to believe that an investigation would not serve the interest of justice.
That right there is a badass woman, and her bravery knows no bounds, as you're about to find. Especially when you find out what Israel did to her. You're about to hear the details from Kenneth Roth, who is an international affairs scholar and former head of Human Rights Watch.
The Israelis clearly misjudged Fatou Bensouda. One person is quoted as saying they thought of her as, basically merely black and African, so who cares, as they put it. But she's a tough woman. And she resisted, these threats to her family, a sting operation against her husband. And she didn't have to act at that point because the court authorized the investigation to go forward in February 2021, near the end of Bensouda's term in June 2021. So she could have just sat on it and let Karim Khan, her successor, take over. She didn't. I met with her numerous times. She is super professional. She is dedicated to justice. She knew she was facing threats, and she, just persisted. And that's really to her credit. I think the Israelis totally underestimated her. They thought that she could just be pushed over with these threats, and it totally didn't happen.
Right? I mean, come on. How brave is this woman? And according to The Guardian, on January 16th, 2015, within weeks of Palestine joining the ICC as a member, Bensouda opened a preliminary examination into what, in the legalese of the court, was called the situation in Palestine. The following month, 2 men who had managed to obtain the prosecutor's private address turned up at her home in The Hague. Sources familiar with that incident said the men refused to identify themselves. They then said that they wanted to hand deliver a message to Bensouda. The envelope contained hundreds of dollars in cash and a note with an Israeli phone number. Sources with knowledge of an ICC review into the incident said that while it was not possible to identify the men or fully establish their motives, it was concluded that Israel was likely trying to signal to the prosecutor that it knew where she lived. The ICC reported the incident to Dutch authorities and put in place additional security, installing CCTV cameras at her home. And thanks to Israel's access to Palestinian communications infrastructure, they were able to listen in on Bensouda and her staff as they spoke to Palestinians without even having to install spyware on the ICC's devices. If Fatou Bensouda spoke to any person in the West Bank or Gaza, then that phone call would enter intercept systems, one source said. Another said there was no hesitation internally over spying on the prosecutor, adding, with Bensouda, she's Black and African, so who cares? And this effort was still ongoing during the current war in Gaza, clearly. I mean, it's been going on for 9 years. The surveillance was ongoing in recent months, providing Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with advance knowledge of the prosecutor's intentions. A recent intercepted communication suggested that Khan wanted to issue arrest warrants against Israelis, but was under tremendous pressure from the United States, according to a source familiar with its contents. As for the Israeli government, well, I mean, they deny all of this, like they deny every awful thing they do. Israel, like the United States, also says that the ICC has no jurisdiction over their country since they are not a member state of the International Court. The US has made that argument, except they abandoned that argument when it was inconvenient, as you're about to hear.
The US was concerned with what's known as territorial jurisdiction. The fact that the court has the power to prosecute somebody for crimes committed on the territory of a court member, even if the person's own country has never ratified the court's treaty. Now, the US hated that because it could mean that Americans are vulnerable. And indeed, there was an investigation that Fatou Bensouda opened in Afghanistan that threatened Bush-era torturers. But the US gave up on that objection because it was territorial jurisdiction that the court used to prosecute Putin in Ukraine.
Putin, war criminal for sure. Netanyahu, now wait a minute. AIPAC pays our lawmakers handsomely to pretend as though Bibi isn't the monster that he is. Nonetheless, the ICC persists. Contacted by The Guardian, a spokesperson for the ICC said it was aware of proactive intelligence gathering activities being undertaken by a number of national agencies hostile towards the court. They said the ICC was continually implementing countermeasures against such activity, and that none of the recent attacks against it by national intelligence agencies had penetrated the court's core evidence holdings, which had remained secure. It gets harder and harder for the US government to provide cover for war crimes committed by Israel, especially when there's another war happening simultaneously and the US condemns the actions of someone like Putin. How do you condemn the actions of Putin while not condemning the overwhelming response by the IDF in Gaza? And that's not to say that Israel didn't have the right to engage in a defensive war. They absolutely did. But can anyone with a straight face argue that Israel hasn't gone too far in the way they have prosecuted this war? For the people out there who say, no, Israel didn't have a right to defend themselves, I don't even take those people seriously. I'm not interested in that conversation. Atrocities were committed on October 7th. So this isn't a debate, in my mind, about whether or not Hamas should be taken out. It is a debate about why it is that other countries who prosecute wars the same way that Israel is doing right now, they get criticized by the United States. They might get prosecuted in The Hague for war crimes. And the US might totally co-sign on that. But when it comes to Israel, there's no such thing as war crimes. There's no such thing as Israel going too far. And I totally disagree with that.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a young Turk.